What's up, guys? Jake here with a quick message before we get on to our show. Please make sure that you like this video below, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, and also make sure that you sign up for notifications. With your guys' help, we can ensure that all of the guests get the right attention and audience that they deserve. I thank all of you guys for joining me along this very adventurous journey, and now let's get on to the show. What's up, peeps? Welcome back to the Guest List podcast. I am here today with somebody I am actually familiar with and a blast from the past. I know for you guys who have been listening with me through this entire time, I always bring up one of my previous business adventures called Chameleon Verified Network. Nick actually was one of the people that I approached to help assist us in this weird, crazy project that we were doing, which ultimately ended up failing, or whatever you want to call as failure, but we'll probably be able to talk about that as much. Nick is actually an entrepreneur himself. He is the CEO of Adlava, which is a web design and SEO software development studio, and the co-founder of Quotible, which is an automative CRM lead response. We'll dissect that a little bit because I know it's a lot of a little bit of jumble. And he's also on the board of directors for Big Brothers Big Sisters. So, Nick, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. Excited to be here.
Yeah, like we were saying before this, blast from the past, man. It's been, what, a year? Maybe, I think when Corey and I came down and approached you guys, it was probably like a year ago.
Year to a year and a half, I think. Yeah. I mean, this year's been a blur, so who knows?
Right, we need to fast forward and just pretend that it never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one of your projects, when Corey and I first approached you, you were working on Quotable, and that was still in its infancy stages, but I know that it's actually found some success moving forward.
Yep.
But before we do get into that, since there's a lot to dissect, I like to just start in the beginning so we can make it easier. So take us back to, let's just say, like your childhood and teenage years. Where did you grow up? What was your mindset, and what kind of activities were you involved with?
So I grew up in 1981, 39, about to be 40. So.
Hey, 40's the new 30, so.
Yeah, exactly. And grew up in New Jersey, actually. So raised by my parents. I have a sister. Spent my whole life there until about 2002, and then moved out west. So I went to Rutgers University. As a kid, had a good upbringing. My really close bond with my father, who was kind of like my role model, which is probably pretty common. And he had drug addictions and battled with that. So it was challenging times, but learned a lot from him. He was an entrepreneur, owned his own business, had multiple offices, super successful, and kind of, unfortunately, like a lot of other people you probably know that have battled drug and alcohol addictions, it becomes a disease that unfortunately took over.
It's tough to recover from sometimes. Some people get out of it, but it ends up being like a spiral and an on and off scenario throughout your entire life.
It does. And there's nothing you can do without having it impact who you are, both negatively and positively. And so there's been some negative impact in my life due to that. But I think I tried to do my best to kind of channel that to motivate myself to be better, and one of the things he said to me when I was a kid was, you're going to be a better man than me, which kind of resonated with me. As a kid, I was like, that's impossible. I can never be better than you. He was gregarious, guy. People loved him. He was successful. So I always emulated him. Even to this day, I kind of look like, where am I at in comparison to where my dad's at?
Yeah, you use that like age gap. You're like, all right, when he was 40 and now I'm 39, like where are you? Start evaluating it.
100%. That's exactly what I think about, right? And with anybody you as a mentor, you kind of say, how do I compare to them, or but again, I think I've become that better man. I try to be involved and close with my family, and we've all had our challenges and made mistakes in the past, but try to learn from them and kind of use as motivation to grow, to be a better person. So,
yeah, I think as long as you can look back and notice what you had to change and then learn from it and move forward, like that's the best thing that you can do. That's one of the reasons why I'm kind of against like cancel culture and kind of go in the political space or whatever. 100%. But like, I'm not a big fan of it because people who, you dox what you said on social media 10 years ago, they're basically stamping that you're never going to change and that you didn't learn from it. So like, that's kind of why I've not been a fan of that culture. Although sometimes people do say distasteful things and maybe harmful, but I think the way that humans are, we tend to more often than not learn from our past mistakes.
Well, and people deserve a second chance. I know it's cliche, but I mean, people say things when they're you look at athletes, they're like, oh, first round draft pick said something negative when they were 17. I mean, people say a lot of bad things when they're 17. So it's all about learning from your mistakes, learning from other people's mistakes, and just trying to, get better every day. So.
What led you to come out to the West? Was there a specific reason why? Or you kind of just took a dart and threw it at a map and you're like, all right, West it is?
So do you want the true story or do you want the...
Hey, we can make a concoction of false and lies and truths. Whatever you feel.
We'll edit everything after this. So the true story is I actually went to Rutgers University. So I was there for about a year and a half, 2 years. Was dating a girl. We broke up. And then I had finals where I had I'm a procrastinator by nature. So I had 4 tests to do plus a big paper. And I decided to study for the 3 tests. And I found a book, an American history book or American studies book, that the content was supposed to be written about a family from a generation. So I wrote about the nuclear family in the 50s. And I told my mom, I'm like, hey, Mom, I highlighted everything. Just copy this and write out type up a report for me. And so she plagiarized it while I was studying for the other exams, did really well in the other exams, walked in to hand in the paper and was so tired because I stayed up all night studying that I was holding the book that I copied underneath my arm and gave it to the teacher. Well, the teacher didn't notice the book, but then she called me after. She goes, Nick, you're a great student, but I have to report you. And I'm like, I was like, I know what happened here. But she's like, one of my best friends wrote that book that you copied.
Oh no!
So I actually got suspended for a semester when I was at Rutgers, and they let me back in, which is kind of embarrassing, but I might as well tell the true story. And I got a job at Merrill Lynch doing some financial stuff. I was a young kid. I was 18, 19 years old.
Still just trying to find your way.
Exactly, right? So, and then when I was doing that, I did a little soul searching, and I was like, my dad brought it up. He's like, you should get out of New Jersey, at the time, and or previous before that. And so I just said, you know what, I'm gonna move somewhere far away. So I ended up transferring to the University of Arizona and went to school there for a year. I met a good friend over there, and him and I one night were like, let's move to Vegas.
Yes.
So in 02,
pre-roll it.
Yeah, exactly. Somehow I convinced my mom. We were talking about it yesterday that she's like, I don't know how I let you move to Vegas, but convinced her, and him and I moved out here together and been here since 2002. So long time.
Did you transfer over to UNLV?
I did. Yep, I did. I'd love to say I graduated college. I actually, one of those people, I started working. I actually got a job for Light Group, which I like to call my college education. It was rough. I mean, I was working 6 days a week, nights, days, and it was just a lot, right? But I learned so much about marketing, about what I was good at, sales, creating events, things like that. So I got so far along with that I had 3 classes left to take to graduate and never did. So sorry, Mom.
I'm actually glad that you brought that point up, because this is kind of something that I harp on all the time, is that Nevada always terrible in education in terms of where they rank among the states. Mm-hmm. But what's not a statistic is the amount of entrepreneurs that the Strip builds because of the opportunities that are there. It's plentiful. Yep. And you found out that you liked marketing and some of these other things that were ingrained into the job that you had. And then you're able to, take those skills and then build something of substance. And then even beyond that, evolve into Quotible and some of these other things. Yeah. Yeah. And I always tell my staff or people that I know, there's nothing like real life experience. School's great, but again, you learn out of a book, right? And actually physically and mentally doing the job is where you really kind of absorb it and learn what you like, what you don't like, and move on from there. Right. So I'm assuming once you left and you learned these skills, this is when you created Adlava?
Yeah. So what happened was when I was at Light Group, they actually moved me to the real estate division because real estate was booming back then. So they had a mid-rise project called Spa Lofts, and I was the director of marketing for that. So I was in my early 20s, 22, 23. One of the things I loved about working with them, and it was also scary at the same time, was they would just say, make us money. That's your job title. There was no assistance in learning what to do. So you're kind of thrown to the wolves, and you have to kind of learn on your own. But I got my real estate license and was invited to a VIP viewing of City Center. And when I saw it, I was like, what if I built a website, did some online advertising to target people to buy these condos? let's see what happens. So on the side, I did that. I hired a local company here called Advisors at the time, one of the few SEO digital marketing companies in town. A brilliant guy that owned the company. He built the site, managed all my AdWords campaigns, and then I sold a condo at the Mandarin Oriental at the time for $1.6 million, and then I quit my job. So, I learned a lot at Light Group, but it was just a lot of hours, it was tough work. So once I made that money, I was like, you know what, let me do something different. And so I actually jumped into real estate for a little while and did that and sold high rises, and then had a lot of free time. So the owner of Advisors said, hey, Nick, you have a lot of interest in digital marketing and maybe you can help me with sales on the side. So I did that, realized I didn't really enjoy marketing. I wasn't fulfilled from it. It wasn't, I guess, mentally challenging for me. It was lucrative, but it didn't get my juices rolling, So I ended up working with him and partnering with him on that business before Adlava. Yep.
How different was the digital marketing space back then as it is to now? Because I know most of the digital marketing now is through social media apps, but back then that was before the boom even really happened. I think that iPhone was created in 2008. Was that around when you created Adlava?
I created Adlava in 2009.
Okay,
so July of 2009.
Similar.
Yeah, so it was very different. I would say it was very like Google focused, right? Like, organic rankings, paid ads. There were no social media channels back then, so it was more focused on that, and then the website. So it wasn't as saturated. So there wasn't like a million companies doing it like there is today.
It's literally.
And unfortunately, most of that is riffraff. You have 80% of those companies are really not legitimately doing good solid work for their customers. Back then, there was few and far between. We were one of the few shows in town, so we got a lot of big accounts. And unfortunately, with the downturn in the economy, bankruptcy was big. So we had a lot of bankruptcy law firms we do campaigns for and things like that. But I learned a lot on that job. And unfortunately, my quote unquote partner, I wasn't really a partner. I was a young guy, kind of got taken advantage of a little bit. He had a gambling problem. And when I found that out, I was like, I'm out of here. And so I started Adlava. Didn't really, because I only handled the sales side and didn't develop. I don't code. I don't design. My skill set is with people. And so I used that to leverage some of the relationships I had from Light Group to just slowly start building an account list. But I had put everything on a credit card and just prayed that it would work. Made just enough money to cover my bills for a very long time and just kind of hustled, just worked hard to kind of build up our client base that way.
Yeah, so. Your P&L was net neutral for a little while there.
Yeah. It's crazy starting over like that, like literally going from, having a salary and income you could depend on to nothing, and it's scary, but it's also invigorating and kind of something that I love to do, not be broke, but I love the challenge,
Yeah, it's really about the journey. And when you listen to these interviews or these speeches of people who have celebrated massive success, they always say to embrace that journey, because looking back on it, you're never going to have it again. Mm-hmm. But you're able to look back and be like, oh, I made these decisions that were forks in the road that led to my ultimate success. But it doesn't feel like that in the moment. It just feels like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm never going to make it.
That's a great way to put it too. Because when you're in the moment, it's like, it feels difficult, right? And nerve wracking. And then when you look back, you look at your journey, just like you said, and it's like everything led up to be doing this, and it's kind of cool,
It's a nice foundation to say the least.
Yeah.
And also, as far as that you led on to, your leadership style where, you're not the tech builder, you're not the savvy specialized person, you're more of your personal person. And that's kind of what I relate to as well. And also you see leaders like Steve Jobs was like this as well. As, he didn't know how to code or anything like that, but in order to be an effective CEO, you need to be able to corral the troops, so to speak, and get them motivated. And it takes a certain type of leader to do that, and not just kind of bury your head into the coding or the specific designs and marketing. You need to be kind of like a do-all or a master of none kind of person.
In a way, you're 100% correct. I mean, it's all about having a good team, because one of the things I feel like is my strength is cultivating that team. At Adlava, we have amazing people. I wouldn't be anywhere close to where we're at without them. But I think I noticed a lot too from my previous experiences, the way, I don't want to name names, but employers treated their employees. And I just said, when I start a company, I don't want it to be anything like that. I want to have an environment where people feel free to think, to create their own decisions, their own destiny, but still work hard, and I think that pays off. We have a really close, we're like a family, really close knit team that does great work, but I agree with you. You have to have that, sense of just getting people excited, which is tough.
Yeah. You take the Tony Hsieh message. And that's when we were talking before this, I started reading his book, and he was always focused on building culture first, to having good relationships with the customers. But first you have to build it through your employees. Mm-hmm. And then that message kind of echoes out through the company. And then you can build a nice clientele and a trustworthy base to begin. And as right before this conversation, I was browsing on your website, and you guys literally have a specific page on your website that says company culture.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, instead of just like an about us, we were like, let's call it culture. Because really there is a unique culture at our office, and we get that compliment a lot when people see our site. They're like, I felt like I already knew you guys before I came down here. And I feel like, for any business, a customer needs to feel like, I want to go out and have a beer with Jake. I could hang out with this guy. I feel comfortable with him. And you need to build rapport and trust with your customers. And the best way to do that is by building a team where everybody has that same mindset, where we truly care about their success. We care about each other's success. And that just like spreads throughout the business, but also through your customers as well. So
yeah, when Corey and I came in, Corey's the founder of Chameleon that worked on the project with me. Your guys' office space is very open, very welcoming. The office space or the conference area, it's a big wooden table, and you have the chalkboard on the side with the drinks, and everyone seemed like they were really on the same page as far as something that Corey and I were just still trying to put together. And like, you were able to communicate with us and understand what we were trying to do, but then also add your guys' specific creative ideas and expertise and so forth. Yeah.
And it's important with anybody, right? Like, you want to feel like we care about your success, right? And we do that with every project we have. It's so important to make the customer feel comfortable, right? And there's a lot of people that are just worried about making money. The money comes with that.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, it's not. Listen, we all want to make money, right? But if that's your number one reason for having a business or for building any kind of new venture, I think it's a mistake. In my opinion, because if you love what you do, you love who you work with, and you love your customers, the money comes. It always does, And you got to obviously work hard. That's one thing you can't ever replace. In fact, with Quotible, we're competing with companies that are heavily funded, Bay Area, big tech companies with massive staffs. And I always tell the team, it's like the only way we can win is, number one, we're smaller, so we're more agile, so we can create and build for our customers based on their specific needs, but we can outwork them. Even though they have more people, if you think about it all the time, and I'm constantly, like, when I wake up, when I'm laying in bed, when I'm showering, when I'm driving in my car, I'm thinking about how can we improve the business, how can we make our tool better for our customers, and the same thing with Adlava too. It's like it needs to be ingrained in kind of who you are and the way you think.
Yeah, you have to have a slight obsession over your project. It may sound harmful for just your own personal well-being, but you have to commit to it fully. You have to understand what your weak points are, what your strengths are, what you're missing. It's just like a giant 360 whirlwind all the time of where do you want to go? How do you get there? What shouldn't we be doing? And so forth.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that's why it's not for everybody. And I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. You have to be able to really handle real big highs and real big lows. And it's never, ever like this. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen today, which is exciting and fun, but at the same time is can be scary, and that's why I think I don't know, I'm a sick person, I guess.
We're all sick. Yeah. In terms of Adlava, I know you guys have kind of expanded over the time. Obviously, you started with ads, and now going through a little bit of your story, Adlava kind of makes sense. I was confused in the beginning because I was like, oh, we're building software. It's called Adlava. I was like, but I don't see the ads or whatever.
Yeah.
Is there any specific part of Adlava business that takes priority over any sector?
I think like any business, you have to adapt. When we first started, it was like, let's make sales and get what we can get, right? And then as we started building a team and better customers, we really got really good at building things, building websites, primarily for years. So that was like our core competency. So we did a lot of casinos, any type of business you could think of. And then we went to a transition where we're like, hey, let's like focus more on digital marketing again, because that's where the market's going. And then we went to, hey, let's focus on software. So we kind of adapted, and I'm dragging that out over a 12-year period, right? We didn't change up every day, and right now we're really focused on software and digital marketing campaigns for clients. That's our core business. The software projects are great too because they're super creative. Websites are challenging, like a standard website, because there's a million web designers out there. 90% are terrible, but they're still it's very saturated. There's build-it-yourself tools now in the market, so we have to kind of adapt based on the need of the consumer, right? But software is something that you can't just build. Like as you know from building Chameleon, it can be built really well or really incorrectly, but not everyone can do that. So you don't see a million software companies in town. I think we're one of the few.
Exactly. Yeah. It's something you're leading it perfectly into what I was just about to say next is they always say software is eating the world, right? I've had on one other software development company, my friend Nick Benbenek, he runs a deep space program, but there's really no software development companies out here. I can't understand why. Do you think it's the barrier to entry in terms of the skill or maybe the capital that you need to start something?
Barrier of entry for sure, but I think it's the market here actually. Even though Vegas is entrepreneurial and there's tons of businesses locally, it's not really. I don't want to say it's not a tech forward company, but I think a lot of the businesses are a little bit more archaic. Even the casinos, we do a lot of work for casinos where we've built player club portals and things like that, and they're disorganized. Their systems don't communicate with each other. There's a lot of politics. Like it's just like it's difficult to find the business on the software side. So we don't usually have like a million of them going at once. We have a handful, but they're lucrative projects for us, and they're fun to do. They're super creative, and I personally love UI UX, like planning, because apps are very task based. How do we create on a mobile screen like the ability for someone to do something quickly? And our team really likes to do it, right? So a lot of times when we do a software web project, we roll them into some sort of digital marketing campaign as well.
That's smart. I didn't realize how important the user interface and like the design is in terms of the success and the way that people kind of navigate different apps. Like building Chameleon and talking with you guys kind of opened my eyes to like this, like it needs to be a nice balance of simplicity, but there also needs to be complexities in terms of the code and the app.
Sure.
It's like this weird like painting job of trying to get the perfect match, but also not copying whoever might be doing something similar.
Yeah, and you got to take a look at the demographics of the users based on the app itself. Like who's going to be using it? Is it going to be an older group? Is it going to be younger? And that'll kind of decide what direction to go in. But whether it's a young demographic or an older demographic, it needs to be intuitive and easy to use. So you look at these like Facebook, for example, or Instagram. I mean, it's super simple to use it, right? But it's a very powerful, heavy piece of software on the back end that requires countless programmers to build. But if you look at the front end, the design, it's pretty. The icons, where to click, or tap with your finger. And so I truly believe that's a mistake that a lot of companies make, not only just with software, but with their website or even their brand as a whole, is that they don't put enough time and attention to the design, the look, the feeling, building that brand equity in your business, right? So people say, oh, I know who they are. I've seen that before, or I feel good when I look at that. And it's super important. And we're lucky enough to have a really talented team of designers at our company. And we've been known for design. One big project we did was with the city of Las Vegas to redo the Las Vegas Nevada.gov. And they hired us specifically for that reason, to help them plan the user experience, because they had a really old site, really difficult to navigate. I think it had like 50,000 pages or something like that. And most of them are like either broken links so our team spent countless hours just dissecting all the different sections of the site and reorganizing all the content to make it easy to navigate. And then we built out wireframes and did all the user interface designs and met with every single department, because every department in government is kind of like their own entity.
Yeah, it's like compartmentalized.
It is. And everyone thinks, right, they're the most important department. And so there's like this battle with, finding a way to make everybody happy with what they've got, but still delivering a great product. So design is extremely important.
Do you enjoy working more with public projects or private projects?
We've had a phenomenal experience with the city. We're kind of like their go-to company for web projects. So we've done probably about 7 or 8 projects for them now. We've had nothing but great experience with them. But we haven't had a lot of government projects, so it's hard to say public versus private. But I've really enjoyed working with them. So I lean public, but it's not. We don't have a big sample size there. So
I do give Nevada and more specifically Vegas credit because they are very progressive, forward thinking. So they understand that they have to get into whatever is pop culture kind of sense. Mm-hmm. And you see that happening time and time again with the different creative projects that they do. And Vegas's essence is always like tear down whatever is old and then rebuild something new in its structure to kind of be on like the cutting edge of entertainment or conventions and now sports stadiums and whatever the case is. So it kind of speaks to the tune of the essence of Vegas is that like we need to be out here on the cutting edge because that's kind of emblematic of what the city's like cultivating into.
Yeah, no doubt.
Here, let me propose this question then. I want to stay on Adlava for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll go into Quotible. I know Quotible can seem a little bit mundane because it's the car industry, but in terms of Adlava, where do you think the future is headed in terms of the company and kind of like the combination of digital marketing, branding, tech, and so on, that space?
Yeah, good question. I mean, you never know what the future holds. I definitely feel like from our perspective right now, like some of the challenges I mentioned where a lot of our revenue is being generated from building websites, you can't rely on that, right? So we've really pivoted to doing really a lot of content because a lot of companies, they can post on social media, but they can't really come up with like the creative campaigns that we can. So doing like real cool, like video shots, photos, carousel ads, so stuff that's a little bit more animated, type of, when you're scrolling, you got an animated ad. So we're trying to be more of a content house. And that's what I was telling you before I came on, that we're building a little podcast area in our area just because we want to be, experts within our industry. So interviews with our staff about a project, bringing in a client to talk about their business, building good creative content. I think that indirectly attracts new customers for us. And then being able to do it for clients because people don't have the time to do that kind of stuff, or they don't have the resources to do that. So I think our big pivot for 2021 is to get even deeper into content creation. Because really, that, as you know, content is king, which is, again, another cliche phrase, but it's true. Because one podcast like you do can be turned into a blog, can be transcribed, can be posted on all your social channels. And then, like myself, you interview me, I can go ahead and share that with my network. So it's a great way one piece of content can be spread out throughout multiple channels, and you get a lot of life on it. And then you can repost it later, take snippets of it. So we want to start doing that kind of stuff moving forward, is get really deep into the client's business and help them with content creation.
That's smart because a lot of times if you don't have the idea of how to go about content creation, it could come off either one as just like a giant sales pitch, which is going to turn you off.
Correct.
Or just comes off bland and there's no personality and it feels like you're just throwing a picture up there just like, oh, I have to post, so I'm just going to throw a quote up there or something like that.
Yeah, like Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and it just like, it doesn't relate to your brand. And as we know with algorithms and social media, if you get on the wrong side of it, it can really like dampen your reach in terms of like the message that you want to say and the amount of people that can have it.
Yeah, it's building your brand too. It's coming up with a cohesive brand, a style, and then translating that throughout all of your platforms. And I was on the phone with a big developer the other day actually that just hired us to redo their website and shoot photos, drone photography and videography for the site. And he liked the culture page on our site as well. And his biggest thing was like, I don't get business off of my website, but indirectly I do. So the second I meet someone, the first thing they do, like everyone, is they search my name or they search my business name, and then they see my website or they see my social channels, and my social channels are empty. My website is outdated, and it doesn't reflect who we are as a company. It doesn't reflect where we're going in the future or where we were in the past. And so That's one of the things we're really good at, and what we want to help our customers do is really do a better job of showcasing who they are, and how they can help their customers succeed. Right?
Yeah. In today's day and age, where you can basically research anyone in 3 seconds by Googling it, you kind of have to be more transparent and have the ability for guests or customers to kind of peer into like almost the culture or like the inner workings of what a company is. And they have to be able to relate to not only the brand, but the people as well.
100%.
And it's just like, for example, I use this example all the time, but Elon Musk, right? Like anytime people think of Tesla, you automatically think of Elon Musk. He's forever tied to that brand.
Oh yeah.
And so that's been kind of going on now for 5-10 years. And that kind of idea is trickling down to the small businesses as well, where the customer, they want to know who the CEO is. They're like, they have to be able to relate to, Nick Kaptain, and they also have to be able to relate to Adlava or Quotible. Yep. It's like a combination of both. So you have to be able to just open up like the opacity, and they have to be able to peer in and see what the culture is and what your kind of thoughts are. Yeah.
Being transparent, right. And that's one of the things that we did for ourselves is we built out a content calendar, and we have certain days that we do certain things. Like maybe it's reviewing a project, or it's highlighting a staff member. But again, like you said, it's opening yourself up, showing who you are. And because then people want to do business with people that they like.
Exactly.
And so if they feel like, based on what they've seen, I feel comfortable with these people, they seem like good people, that translates into business. So even though I don't look at what we're doing as directly generating revenue today, over time, it really compounds and becomes something that's valuable.
Isn't it strange how in today's day and age, it seems like there isn't as much privacy and everything's public, but yet being able to trust somebody has never been so important. Yeah. It's so strange. It's like everything is out there to search for, but yet even though you see what they're about, you're like, do I trust them?
Yeah.
It's so strange. So you have to kind of like bridge that gap together somehow. And that's what content creation does. And I'm glad that you are looking into starting a podcast, because I think that everybody should have a podcast, no matter who you are, even if you're not trying to look and, scale it to thousands of downloads, like even on a micro scale, just being able to bring in your customers and sit and have a conversation with a potential client or even a partner, and just have an intimate conversation, because the way that humans react behind closed doors and through a mic, knowing that somebody's recorded, is completely different, which is cool. You're like a little bit more open.
Yeah, 100%. I think like anybody in any industry or any craft, is you gain so much experience and knowledge, positives, negatives, just things that come along with doing that specific role or business, right? And you become an expert, right? And you don't, and if it's all up here, it's useless. So we follow a lot of other tech companies. Like there's a platform we use called Webflow. It's a content management system, almost similar to like a WordPress, but it's a pretty slick tool. They do an amazing job of promoting and pushing content out to their customers and helping them become better. And they've got a great Facebook group of people that chime in and help each other, right? And so it's like, you don't want to retain information. It's better to give that information, and by giving it away for free, it ends up translating into future business as well. And so I think what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you.
It's pretty cool. I'll probably come to you for some tips, because I don't know what I'm doing.
Would love to help. I've actually since I started back in April, I've probably seen 50 to 100 podcasts pop up, and it just makes me happy to see. But it's funny, because when I started, I was like, man, I'm late to the game. Like this has been going on for so long, but it doesn't matter when you start. It's just getting your foot in there and just starting. And that's all that matters. Yeah. And
it's challenging for me. I'm like, I'm not a real big guy into self-promoting, like my social channels. I don't do a lot of posting, all the stuff I should be doing. It's just not really my thing, but I felt more comfortable doing a setting like this, because I like talking to people. I like learning about their experiences. And it's a lot easier for me as a person to like have something like this set up where I could just chat, right? And not have to like write a blog or post like, hey, check out what I'm doing right now in my Instagram page. Yeah. It's kind of not my thing, right?
Yeah, everyone has their own content medium, and it scales to the macro levels, where what we're doing, I would say, is probably one of the longest ones, a long form conversation through podcasting. And then you go down the micro scale, and that's probably TikTok or maybe Twitter, where it's just like 10-second kind of clips into people's life. And then there's the mediums of Medium Exchange, podcasts, and then you have YouTube, which is kind of in the middle as well. So everyone has like their medium. It's kind of just discovering what it is.
Yeah.
But you have to put effort to do it first. But don't be afraid to kind of experiment and go through trial and error. I created literally a channel on everything, and I've been toying around with it. And then after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on the podcast, YouTube, and then Instagram and Twitter. I'm a big Twitter guy.
What made you start the podcast?
Oh man, I felt like I've been a big fan of podcasting for a long time. Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss and a bunch of the guys that identify as the intellectual dark web people, like Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro and Eric Weinstein and Brett Weinstein. They had a large influence on me in terms of like, they showed that in today's society, you have the capability to speak your mind in any way and kind of like elicit whatever you've been hiding. Like, for example, Joe Rogan was talking about all of his drug use for so long, and when I watched that DMT episode when I was in college, and I was like, can you do that? I was like, is that legal? Like,
exactly.
I was so dumbfounded by it.
Yeah.
And then I started looking into it and researching what podcast was and started listening to it. And then growing up in Vegas, obviously doing Chameleon and a bunch of other business adventures, I was just like, Vegas is literally going to be the next LA. There's so many entrepreneurs out here. There's so many creative people, and there's so many cool projects going on, but there was no talk show that was happening. Yeah. So I was like, all right, I waited around for 2 years to somebody to do it. Nobody did it. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to do and be the talk show, because I also, like you, I like talking with people in long forms. Growing up, I realized that most of my conversations with people were like at least 10 to 15 minutes, whether it was a random person or not. And I was that kid in elementary school who got an S in their participation for always talking in class all the time. And it's like, look who's winning now, Mrs.
Exactly.
Sue. Like,
what I'm good at.
yeah, you know, it's just in-person communication. It's hard to replicate through social media. And I think that's kind of why social media has become a little bit of an echo chamber, and there's a lot of animosity on there, because you can't replicate that, like
the true dialogue,
the social cues, the body language, the emotions. It's just like, it's kind of lost in that new platform.
It's almost like when you send an email to, so we had this come up the other day where one of my team members sent an email to a customer, and the email wasn't confrontational, but it was an email, and it was perceived as confrontational by the customer. And so we did a call and everything was fine. But people misconstrue words. Like when you send a text message, or when you send an email, or when you make a social post, they're reading the words and kind of creating, we were just talking about today, their own tone of what that person meant. And so when you're actually physically on the phone with someone, or you're physically in front of someone doing an interview, you know what they're, based on body language, the tone of which they say the word, that it's not confrontational, right? So it's just, that's why I feel uncomfortable posting on social media, because I'm always like, does that sound right? Or, does that come off the way I want it to come off? And I start second guessing, and I'm like, all right, delete the post.
Yeah. You don't want the message to get lost in translation through what social media is.
Yeah.
But it's like this question, and it sounds so mundane, but it's like, is a period on the internet, is that aggressive? Like, you ever see that, where it's like on Twitter, when people post stuff, they don't put periods at the end versus people who do. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I'm just writing corrected grammar, but you come off aggressive putting a period, even though it's literally just a dot on a screen.
And that's the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this format is pretty cool, for businesses to take on too, like you were saying before, because it's personal, it's real, which is nice these days.
And just talking to a bunch of podcasters who are farther along their path, most of them end up leveraging the podcast into something else. A lot of times people approach me and they ask me, how are you going to monetize this? When are you getting ad money? And I'm like, at this point in the game, that's not even what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'm looking to build connections. And then when the idea comes, then I can be like, okay, this is what I want to do based off of all the connections that I've made.
Sure.
But it's like in the beginning too, when you're starting, you're still trying to find your own voice. Like, you're just constantly messing up. You have to, you just cringe watching all your old videos. Yep. But it's just like, it's such an effective tool that I really have not met anyone yet that does a podcast and it hasn't changed their life in any way, or their business as well. I see business podcasts popping up more and more as well.
Yeah, I do see that. And that makes total sense what you're saying. I totally agree. And you, like anything else in life, you have to, sometimes I think people are scared to just take that step in, right? Because it is scary. but it's the only way it's ever going to happen, right? And so the fact you did it is impressive, right? And as you, like you said, you cringe at looking at the old videos. You're like, man, I can't believe the equipment I had, the way I asked the questions, but you learned, and so as you do it more and more, you're just going to become great at it.
Yeah, there's a friend that I just met on the internet, and he didn't coin the term, but he turned me on the term learning in public. And that's basically what a lot of people are doing nowadays is when you become a digital entrepreneur and you're creating a channel or a social media account or whatever, you're 100% of the time you're going to be terrible in the beginning.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that whoever your viewers are, your audience, they get to learn with you. So they kind of attach to you more because they're literally learning with you and they're watching you evolve over time. And that's how you build like a very staunch audience that's like for you and everything that you do.
Yeah, no, I love it.
So let's transfer a little bit over to Quotible now. Since you'd mentioned, when we were walking in, that now you have about 70 partnerships. I mentioned in the beginning, it's an automotive CRM lead response. That sounds like a lot of gibberish, to be honest. So can you just explain that a little bit of what it is?
Yeah, I'll kind of give you the backstory a little bit too. So as you know, we were talking about, we come from a software background. I did a project years ago for Gallen Ford, which is a Ford dealership on Rainbow.
Hear those commercials all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, the general manager and I became friendly, and him and I grabbed lunch one day, and he was kind of complaining about the way in which his salespeople respond to their customers as a first response. So typically when a car buyer goes to a dealer's website, or let's say a third party, website like cars.com or TrueCar, those leads funnel into the dealership CRM. A CRM is essentially a customer relationship management software where it's a big database of all their customers. And then they go in and select the customer. And if they're looking for a quote, it was really complex to send them the quote because there's all those calculations with finance and lease and all that. So his team was sending out just a cash quote. So they'd go to one resource to find out MSRP. They'd go to Ford's site to find out what the rebates are. They would go to the pricing matrix, which is a printout of all their discounts, plug it all into an email, literally pull out their phone and calculate what the cost would be, and then send it out. Now, number one, it took too much time, so it was very inefficient. Number two, the aesthetically an email is kind of drab. Number three, and I think most importantly, is the brand wasn't really engaged, and people weren't opening up the email. So his open rate was like 40%. And so he's like, how do we build something that's more interactive that consumers want, right? But also makes it easier for my salespeople to deliver something more impactful. And so we built Quotible. And so essentially what Quotible does is it integrates with the dealership CRM, pulls in all the customers, and allows them with a few clicks to be able to send a automotive quote to a consumer via text and email, where the customer receives it and they can actually calculate payments, appraise their trade-in, look at 360 spins of the vehicle, download brochures, and it notifies the sales rep and integrates and posts that back to the CRM of any activity they're doing. So it's a sales tool essentially.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're optimizing the process. You're saving time, efficiency, but you're also creating a coming of the age product that's in tune with where society is progressing. And it sounds kind of like it's kind of funny that you say that because I use this term all the time, this metaphor of the scummy auto salesperson, right? Like you never know what the price is going to be. And every movie and TV show, they always portray the guy who's going to go into the car salesman, but they're going to stage that they're leaving because they didn't get their price. And then there's kind of like this charade going on to get to like the bottom line of a price. But now with Quotible, you could kind of just send out the price. They could see everything, and they can also view what they're trying to buy as well.
100%. And it's all about transparency at the end of the day, because everything's out there on the internet for consumers now. They can do a lot of those things on their own. And even with social media, like you were saying before, it's like things are out there for free and things are out there. Information is readily available. So what we did was we just took stuff that were in different places and consolidated into one piece of technology. And we've had great success with it. And this year was a little chaotic, right? Because dealerships were shut down and it was a little scary. We lost some customers, picked some back up. Wasn't the year we wanted or expected, but it was a learning experience with no doubt. I mean, I always work better when my back's against the wall. And when COVID hit, it was a lot of fear. I mean, Adlava, was shut down. We turned off all our ads. No incoming business. Quotible had, fallout of 10, 15% of customers because they didn't know if they were going to be able to pay their bills. They had to fire, terminate half their staff. And so it was a really challenging time, to kind of navigate through. And then you have all these loans that are coming in and you're waiting on. And
people are tight on money. They don't really know. So then it affects the businesses. It's been a really challenging time. But I think in a traditional COVID fashion, it's kind of accelerating a lot of these digital processes and transitions that are happening. So it sounds like you guys actually might have been ahead of the curve for what's about to happen.
Yeah, and it was a little bit of, that's one of our challenges too, because we kind of invented a tool, like there's nothing else like it. Mm-hmm. And so people aren't looking for it, right? So that's one of our challenges on the sales front is like, how do we make this more of a need versus a want? Because it is far superior than what they're doing now. Because most of the time when dealerships are sending out an email, it's going in a spam or promotions tab. They're not texting those responses out. So it's very outdated, but they're comfortable. They've been doing it for 15 years. So to get them to change their process, even though it's a slight change, is definitely a challenge. But with COVID, I mean, I think the biggest learning I took out of it was you can only control what you can control.
It's true.
You know what I mean? Like, and so like during that time, it's like, you don't know what the future is going to be. You don't know how the world's going to change. You don't know when the next customer is going to come. You don't know what's going to happen with your team, whether or not you can afford them. That you don't know any of those things. So for me, and the team, we did a great job of making the best use of that time by rebranding, taking a look at who we are and what our customers' needs are, spending more time with each customer to find out what they want more out of the product. On the Adlava side too, we kind of started working on a new website. Like we just made the most of that time. For me personally, I lost a bunch of weight. Doesn't look like it, but I did. Probably about 30 pounds. Most people about 20 during COVID.
That's good. Congrats.
Yeah. So, but I can control those things. I can control what I'm eating. I can control going to the gym. I can't control if coronavirus is going to rage and we're all going to be shut down, right? So if you dwell on those things and you focus on the negative, you can't get anywhere. You can't improve your business. You can't improve yourself. And so I've had some friends that have struggled through the time, right? And I'm fortunate that we survived it and we're still here, right? But there's a lot of people, like a lot of the restaurants and stuff. I mean, losing business, going out of business, friends that have lost jobs, family members that have lost jobs. And I always say that to people, just focus on the things you can control because everything else, there's not much you can do about it, And so there's always positives to take out of everything, I think. And
silver linings.
Yeah. And learning from it. And our team, really stepped up. They worked more. They worked faster. We care about each other. They made some personal sacrifices for the business. I was fortunate enough to not have to let anyone go. In fact, we hired a new person recently, so it feels good to be able to do that, right? And it's just sad when you see a lot of our town is built around large public gatherings, mm-hmm. right? And one of the things you brought up earlier is how dynamic this city is and how resilient we are. And we definitely will bounce back. Like my business partner always says, I think once we come out of this, it's going to be like the roaring 20s. Like people are going to, come here in droves. And it's sad to drive by on the 15 when everything was shut down and you see the Raiders stadium that's empty.
That's sad.
T-Mobile, which I love going. I'm a big Knights fan. So I remember going to the games and then you have all the MGM sphere that they were building and all the conventions that are empty. And it's like, it's sad, but again, I think it's going to come back stronger once we do come back.
It is. Vegas is going to go through a giant refacing opportunity and rebranding. What will come out of it, I don't know.
Yeah.
As long as international travel is allowed, I think we'll come back strong. Mm-hmm. If there's still a placeholder on it, then it might take a little bit longer. It'll be more gradually than suddenly.
Yeah, this year is going to be a tough year. I think that at least at a minimum, the first half of the year is going to be challenging for everybody. And so it's just about navigating and going into survival mode, right? And just kind of at a minimum maintaining what you've got and worrying about growing financially, I think it can happen, right? But it shouldn't be the main focus. It should be to make sure, at least for me, my number one priority is making sure that my family has food on the table and that my team's family and themselves are have a job to come back to, right? And to me, I'm proud of that. Like that's one thing that we've been able to succeed in. But next year, I think is going to be tough, like you said. Yeah.
If you look back to the last recession, 2008, a lot of the multi-billion-dollar companies were built during those times, a time of confusion and questioning of what the future may behold. I know like Airbnb just had their IPO yesterday at the time of this recording, and it was like it's valued at like a $20 billion company. It was built in the '08 crisis. A lot of the social media companies really focused on themselves and decided where they wanted to go and flourished from it. So I'm really interested to see like what those next companies are that are being built in this time that 10 years from now, we're going to be like, no shit, they were just working on themselves. Like this is the best opportunity we're going to have to just focus on ourselves and decide what we want to do.
Yeah, and it gives you an opportunity, like I mentioned earlier, when your back's against the wall, you know, if you have a current business or if you don't have a business, to look at what are the needs, because things shifted like so quickly, like overnight. And doing a really deep dive into like, what do people need? What do they want? And then that's where innovation comes into play, right? And so for me, it was like really taking a look at the granular side, the micro part of the business, which is, you know, the details, because every little detail adds up to being a big thing, right? So taking a look at who we are as a brand, how are we communicating to our customers? That's why I took the time to invest in the podcast area, because I'm like, I can do that now, right? Like we have downtime; it's not as busy. Let's spend a little money as an investment, a little bit of a short-term risk, but long-term, it could lead to other bigger things, right? Yep. Something small like
double down on the culture.
Yeah, exactly. So,
do you have the same team that works on Adlava work on Quotible as well?
Yes and no. So it's a little incestual for sure. So our creative director from Adlava, I don't know if you remember Carell, if you met him.
There was a woman and there was a coder. There was like 3 or 4 people in the office.
Okay, yeah. So Carell is our creative director at Adlava. He's been working with us for years now. He's super talented. He's full-time on Quotable. We have, you know, our other designers that work here and there on it, you know, and our project manager works here and there on it. So everybody kind of touches it, because we don't know how big it's going to get, if people have interest in it. I always want to give people opportunities. So if Quotable expands and it grows and, you know, you want to move from this company to this company, cool. You know, whatever. I feel like, you know, you want to put people in a position to succeed and make sure that they're at their happiest. You know, Adlava it's a lot of work, right? Doing things as a service, building things for people. And Quotable is a product. So it's very different. They're completely apples and oranges when it comes to the type of business, not just the industry, but the type of business. And so, yeah, I mean, people have worked on both. We also have a outside sales rep, our VP of sales, Heather, who's amazing. She is based out of New Hampshire, actually. And so one of the things that came out of COVID, actually, and good things do come out of things like that, is we worked with an agency that used to resell Quotable, and she worked for them. And so she was kind of, you know, doing a lot of the sales for Quotable, but still on their payroll. And when COVID happened, unfortunately, they had to say, hey, you know, we can't really afford Heather anymore. And so we took the risk to bring her on full time. And so she's a great friend of mine and an amazing salesperson. So that was like, again, you know, good things come out of bad situations sometimes. And so she's on the East Coast and she does all of our sales, and we're trying to expand our sales team next year. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Are there any distinguishing differences in terms of running a software as a service company and selling a product?
Selling a product as in like a widget, like a e-commerce
like a Quotable. Is there any 2 types of differences in terms of operating the business that are noticeable to you or that like stand out?
Well, with Quotable and Adlava, if I compare the two, Adlava, it's a service, right? So Jake hires Adlava, pays us $1 to do $1 worth of service. And so there's a lot of human interaction involved in that, like personalities, right? So you might have a business partner that, you know, doesn't like anything we do. And there's that, you know what I mean? Like there's that dynamic. Yeah. And then there's also, whenever there's communication every day on a project, there's challenges, right? And so a lot of times we're relying on the client to provide us information. Clients are relying on us to execute tasks. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And it's actually, even though there's a lot of web companies, I don't feel like there's a lot of good ones, because it can get very complex and labor intensive and stressful with deadlines and things like that. Quotable is different in the fact that it's a product. Like we control our own destiny in a way where we interact with our customers, but they're basically just giving us feedback on what we built. And it's not a going project to project to project with different businesses in different industries with different personalities, with different challenges.
So it has more of like a defined path.
It does. And me personally, I mean, I've been doing, you know, working at Adlava for, 12 years, you know, that's why I'm gray up
Legend.
Here. Yeah. So it's a stressful business. I still have passion for it and enjoy it. More of my time is actually dedicated to Quotable because we don't have a big staff built out yet. So I have a great team at Adlava that I trust, and they've been doing a phenomenal job kind of taking on a little bit of a bigger role. And so I've been focusing a little bit more on Quotable. So it's like my little baby too. I've invested, my partner and I put our own money into it. So we've never received any outside funding. So we took on all the risk to build the product. So seeing it grow is kind of like, it's like seeing your child. I have 2 kids, like seeing your kids grow up and it's like, you love nothing more than your children. It's the same thing with a business. It's like, you don't love it. There's nothing you love more besides your family.
Slight obsessive.
Yeah, big time. So
in terms of Quotable, and we kind of touched on this earlier, now that you've entered the massive car and automotive industry, was there a tough barrier to entry in there? Because I know there's a lot of large egos, a lot of established companies that have put their time in, and that maybe will set up some sort of preventative mechanisms for new players to enter the space.
That couldn't be a better question. It is I didn't know this until I got into it, but it is the most challenging industry that you can probably enter in because it's very lucrative. So if you build a software in automotive and it's successful, you're talking a big payday potentially. But to get there, the big thing, I follow podcasts. Actually, there's a guy, I think his name's Andrew Gidzecki. He has a podcast called 0 to 1 million ARR, which is annual recurring revenue. The hardest thing for any SaaS business is to get to that $1 million mark. And, with automotive, which is different than other industries, usually it's like if I build a good product and it's intuitive, the UI looks great, the user experience is solid, the development is seamless, and people like it, you'll do well, right? But with automotive, it's there's a lot of big companies in there that you're competing with. Number 2 is there's a lot of politics in the industry. So the manufacturers, what they call is the OEMs, kind of have a big brother dynamic with the dealers. There's kind of a contentious relationship to a certain extent, and there's they limit the dealers on choosing. Like if it's this type of product, you can only choose from these 5 approved vendors, or we don't give you your co-op money, or we don't give you leads or any benefits that we.
It's like a quid pro quo kind of business.
It's like mafia style, And so like when my team at Adlava saw dealership websites, we're like. And even myself, I was like, we have to build dealer websites. They're horrible. I mean, there's pop-ups scrolling across the screen. And I don't know if you've navigated to a dealer site. And I brought that up to my partner and then to other people that have been in the industry. And they're like, nope, you don't want to go in that world because you have to battle that. There's no free market where they can choose, I want to work with an Adlava. They have to go with this subset. Now you have some rogue dealers like my partner who did choose an Adlava to do a project that just said, I don't care. I'm choosing who I think is best for my business, but he's in the minority. So that's been our biggest battle is we have to create manufacturer relationships. And so we've done presentations for Toyota and regional set point, but that is definitely a big challenge. And that was one of the things that hurt us during COVID because there's these ancillary products called digital retailing products where they can buy the car online, but it's kind of a facade because consumers don't want to technically buy the car online. They will through Carvana because it's only used vehicles, but a new car, if you're going to buy an F-150, you're going to probably go down to the store and want to see the different features and options and things like that. So they ended up, when everything was shut down, those businesses kind of raised up and we have some crossover with them. So there were some challenges there, but then all the manufacturers said only these 5 or 6 products are going to be allotted. So that cost us some business. So there's constant challenges there. It's definitely a tough industry for sure.
I can only imagine. That's usually when in a time of panic, when you go in the financial markets, the risk on assets are always the first ones to be sold off. Mm-hmm. And so kind of what you're saying, like as the ancillary projects, when there is a time of confusion, they're like, all right, we're cutting all of these quote unquote risk on kind of partnerships. We're cutting them out and we're dwindling it down to 3 or 4 people that they're familiar with or companies they're familiar with.
Oh, no doubt. And they were in fear. I mean, being shut down, I mean, when does that ever happen to any business? Yeah. So again, they didn't know at all what it was going to be like. And knock on wood, which is great, people rushed down to the dealerships and bought cars after the shutdowns ended. So for us, the market as a whole has been healthy. Right now is a little bit slow, I think, for dealers. In December, January, COVID's kind of raging again. So there's been a little bit more of a tightening up. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a tough December, January, and part of February for a lot of businesses, unless you're selling hand sanitizer, it's going to be so.
Yeah. Sanitary companies. So in terms to, I guess, scale this outwards, do you just have to lay like a wide foundation and just kind of partner with all of these quote unquote rogue companies and then build like your own kind of stance within the industry?
Well, I think, number one, we do have to build those relationships, but one of the things we're doing a slight pivot on is we took a look at some of the businesses that survived COVID, meaning that we didn't notice really any loss. And a lot of them were not really very strong products, but what they were widgets, meaning that they were something that was placed on the dealer's website or that didn't involve process change or human interaction. And so our product, even though I like to call it semi-automated, it does 90% of the heavy lifting. A salesperson still has to go in and click a drop down and hit send, right? And even though it's as simple as that, it still requires a human to do it. And so one of the things we're pivoting to do now is really focusing on automating the process. So we're building, as part of our solution, the automation of quotes. So when leads come in, nobody needs to interact. We'll have an algorithm based on the year, make, model, trim, and actually deliver quotes to consumers based on what they originally looked for. And so that's one of the things we're doing. And later on, getting into more analytics and being able to write scripts and to further the machine learning on it. Because if they looked at red cars or Ford Explorers, let's start serving them those types of quotes in the future.
It's like a YouTube related videos kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So we feel like that we're going to be better positioned. That we're set to launch it sometime in January, February for next year. Because again, with us, we're very vulnerable because if let's say there's a small store and they've got 3 salesperson people, and during COVID they let go of 2, and the other guy didn't really use Quotible, we're vulnerable to get canned, right? So, but if it's an automated tool, it doesn't matter which salespeople are there, which ones use it. It fires off on its own and alerts the salespeople, right? So that's what we're doing is trying to build more widgets that make us a little bit more sticky within the organization.
The tech space is so complicated at times, but also seems so simple sometimes as you're explaining it. I mean, I guess that's your experience of 12 years being in the business. You kind of understand the differences between widgets and platform creation and all these different natures and facets to it. Yeah,
and I think a lot of it is boiled down to common sense. I mean, I have a lot of experience with it, but I don't have extensive experience with any of it, if you will. Like I don't build campaigns, I don't design websites, I don't develop. But I think what I am good at, I have an innate sense of like what do people want, right? And what are they interested in? And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what business you're in. What if you're selling, like my sister owns a hair salon, like. What do people want at the salon? What types of cuts do they want? What types of prices do they want? Like those are the things that matter because the execution is important and it's everything actually at the end of the day. But it's creating the vision to give consumers what they're looking for. As simple as that. So you don't need to know how to perform the task. I think you just need to know I want to get to this end goal. Like this is the product that I want, and then work with the experts to get there.
Yeah, it's like a reverse engineering philosophy. I know that's kind of popular in the Silicon Valley area where you write what you want and then you kind of scale it backwards where it's like, all right, I have this end goal, and then you write 2 different ways to get to that end goal, and then it's kind of like a web, and then you have like 10 different start points.
100%. It's all about where you finish, what's at the finish line. And then the execution from that point is then becomes obviously imperative, right? Yep. But if you have a good team of people, which we do, that's the easy part. The hard part is getting it out there to the customers. Marketing is always a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, but that's the thrill of it too, is creating and building. So
that's what keeps you going.
Yeah.
So a few more questions before we get out of here. One, now that you run 2 separate companies, and you're in the tech space and the everything's kind of always ever evolving. When you're looking for new hires, what kind of qualities and capabilities do you look for?
So I like to hire based on the person, like who they are as a person. Like Heather flew out from the East Coast to come out and meet the team, and she complimented. She's like, "Man, what a great team you have! Like they're just great people. They're fun. They're good at their craft. They're just like inherently honest, reliable people." And you can't train that, like you can't teach someone to be a good person. So whenever we bring people on, and a lot of our staff started off as interns or We had a really talented designer, Genevieve, that works for us, that was a cocktail waitress at the end, but got into web design, and she'll admit to this too. Her designs weren't the best day one, right? But Carell, our creative director at the time, and I sat back and we're like, man, there's something about this girl that we like, like there's something great about her, and we were right, like because you can, as long as you find the right person has, they're innately a good person, but then more importantly has the drive to get better at their craft, not only just at work, but in their own time, to learn, to educate themselves. The task of doing the work will get there. You can get someone that really wants to be a great designer to be a great designer because they have that in them. So whenever I look at hiring people, I don't like to necessarily look at their resume, where they went to college, what the experience they had is important. But at the same time, it's like you want to feel good with them. You want to feel like, you could go out to dinner with them or hang out with them and grab a cup of coffee or whatever. And I think those are the types of people that I look for. And, it's really paid dividends, I think, in our company.
Yeah, it's conscious capitalism. You have to invest in your employees, and it just sprouts from there. Yep,
exactly.
And it seems like now the resume, it's almost like contentious at this point because it just seems so outdated. Like people... before the internet, everyone just wanted to have a job as a resume builder. But now it's more about building the relationship directly with whoever is hiring you, because then you could kind of just skip that entire process. And as long as you portray that you have the skills needed to, I guess, adaptability and perseverance and grit, like a bunch of these capabilities, if you could translate them into any job, then you're hireable for most industries.
Oh, 100%. I would definitely say for a lot of younger people, right now it's tough to find a job, but I would just get in anywhere. Like, you find an industry that you think you might have interest in and just start off and just, work your butt off, right? Because if you do that, like, there's no employer on earth that won't want to pay you more money and give you a better title or role based on just straight up work ethic, and I think that's why we've been able to survive. A lot of companies that do what we do locally, like Adlava, went out of business years ago because they didn't pivot when the market changed. And so, you have to constantly adapt. You always have to, put in your 110% effort 100% of the time. And it comes to fruition. All your ideas and where you want to be happens that way.
Smart. Being able to pivot is crucial to any business, and being able to separate yourself as a leader and not being so hands-on. Sometimes you're able to notice when it's time to pivot.
100%.
And that's, like you're saying, that's the ultimatum of the companies that don't survive, is they weren't aware of that because they weren't a CEO. They were just a manager that just was more hands-on.
Yeah. And you almost have to be a little bit pessimistic about your business and yourself. You need to almost like look inside in the mirror or at the mirror and to say, what am I doing wrong? Like that to me actually helps you grow. Like, what are all the areas I can improve the business, or I can improve myself? Like, that was one of the things I wanted to put a little bit more attention on, was my health, because it's stressful running a business, and even before I had a family, I was, drinking a little bit too much, like, because you find different channels to suppress that stress. And, one of the things I made a goal was just to channel that into healthy things. And I've seen that actually translate into the business as well. You actually interviewed Mike Sheedy, who's my trainer.
Yeah, it's the homie. Mike's my boy.
Yeah. So Mike's a great guy, but it's just, you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, what could I have done better yesterday? And, even with the team, it's like, we need to not blame the client for our weaknesses or our challenges. We need to look at ourselves and say, what could we have done to prevent that from happening, right? Or what could we improve? Or what are the gaps in our business? Like, that was how the automation thing came up, was we're vulnerable right now. Even the fact that it's simple, it's still a vulnerability, and that solves that vulnerability. It checks a lot of the boxes. And so you can only improve, I think, if you're willing to look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I have room for improvement. And I like to do that. And sometimes my wife will be like, oh, you're so negative, or you beat yourself up too much. But I feel like if you get complacent, you're like, oh, I'm the best, we're the best there is. Then you're just going to get passed by someone else that's hungrier, that's willing to put in the extra effort and looks at themselves like, hey, I can get better, so.
You have to have that spatial awareness.
100%.
Nick, I have one parting question. Okay. Same question I asked to everybody, and it is, what does Las Vegas mean to you?
Oh, God. what does Las Vegas mean? That's a tough question, actually.
That's why I save it for the end.
Yeah, I Las Vegas is family to me. When I moved here, my whole family trickled out. So I came out here in 2002. Then my sister moved out, and she lived on the couch in my apartment for a while. Then my cousin moved out. My mom moved out. My aunt moved out. My step uncle moved out. Somehow we convinced my 88-year-old grandparents at the time to move out.
Had to be the craps and table games.
Yeah, exactly. So and I met my wife here and have my kids here. So and again, I look at our team as family as well. So and Vegas is a small town. It's like everybody knows each other. Like you and I cross paths randomly, and then now here we are today doing something different. And you want to maintain a good relationship with people, no matter if it turns south or whatnot, because word travels fast out here. And if you do someone wrong, it's a very tight knit community where it has a trickle down effect long term, right? So I love living here. It's a great place to, so many things to do, right? Restaurants and bars and outdoor activities and things like that. So I think it's a great home base, Las Vegas. So.
Couldn't agree anymore. Yeah. Where can all of the listeners learn more about you, Adlava, Quotible, et cetera?
Yeah, so our website for Adlava is adlava.com. It's ADLAVA.com. And then Quotible spelled QUOTIBLE.com. So both our websites, our social channels, would love to chat with anybody if they have any questions. Yeah.
Yep. All the links are listed below. Nick, thank you for coming on.
Thanks,
I appreciate this conversation. Really an effective leader. I like your mentality. A lot of things that you said resonated with me a lot, because I actually say that a lot of times through the podcast. So it's almost like I was talking to, a little bit older of myself.
A little bit older.
You're cool. You're 28. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. But I really appreciate it, Jake. It was a pretty cool experience. And like I said, I'm gonna hit you up for some tips.
Of course. Looking forward to when that podcast comes on.
Cool, man. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time.